So now we've got broadly to grips with the requirements of what we need to know about these fitness tests. I'm going to introduce you to the first example. It's really going to stand as a model of where we're going to go with the remainder of these fitness tests. And I'm going to discuss with you the notion of the sit and reach test. And I'm pretty confident that you would be able to say back to me, well, James, this test, the purpose of this test is to measure flexibility. And of course, we are going to address this concept of validity in a few moments' time, but look, we are looking to address and to measure the component of physical fitness, which is flexibility, the range of motion at all joints. So therefore, we're interested then in whether this test does that. But let's go through the basic requirements. The equipment we need is as follows. We do need an assistant, so this takes at least 2 people, 1 participant, 1 assistant. We do need an S&R box, and by that we mean a sit and reach box, and we've got a specific example of one over here, but we can also kind of make our own if need be, and I'll talk to you a little bit about how that would work. And if we are going to make our own, we would need a tape and we would need a ruler in order for us to be able to go ahead and actually do that. Okay, so on that basis, let's kind of make a start on this. So a couple of things I'd like you to be aware of. First of all, notice that this athlete has got her shoes off. Okay, so the protocol we are going to work with means that shoes are going to be off and we're going to have our feet flat and bare. Well, probably socks is reasonable. Shoes off and to the base of the box in this case. We're also going to say here that this athlete is representing the idea of straight knees. Okay, so the knees are locked. So I'm going to describe that as straight knees. You may want to add the term locked, straight knees or locked knees. So in other words, we are not going to, in a moment, as we see, reach forward further by flexing the knee or bending the knee. We're going to do it by actually measuring the flexibility of our glutes, our hamstrings, our lower back, and our shoulders, amongst other muscles. What we're going to do, therefore, and by the way, I should also say that this image is not actually very helpful for this, but we would, of course, have some kind of wall here that or assistant to actually hold this box in place so that it cannot go further in that direction. It needs to be stable. So once we've got all these things in place, this is what we're going to do. The athlete here is they're going to reach forward and stretch as far as they can. And as a result, you see there's this little marker here. They're going to push that marker as far as they can along this ruler. Okay, so they're going to move it down there. Excuse me, sorry. Sorry, folks. And once in that position, the athlete needs to be able to hold for 2 seconds. So it's a 2-second hold. So we can't do what some athletes try and do, which is kind of jerk forward into position, shove the measure, the marker as far as possible with kind of momentum. No, it has to be steady. So your fingers have to move that marker at all times and be in touch with it. So we have a 2-second hold. And we're also saying that we would actually repeat times 3. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that this athlete has 3 goes at it and they score 21, they score 20, and they score 22 centimeters respectively. So what would happen, therefore, is we would add all of these scores up together, which would give us a total of 63, and we would divide it by those 3 goes, which would give us an average of 21 centimeters. And I'm sure that makes perfect sense to us all. But we repeat 3 times and we take the average, and it's important we realize that. Now, once we've got our average, of course, we have got what we call our test result, and this is what we call our raw data. It's our raw data. 21 centimeters at this point doesn't really mean anything to us. Now, of course, you can do obvious things. If you undertake this test, you can actually obviously compare it to those who've done the test around you or have got what results they've got. I should have said, by the way, it's actually the assistant which judges the distance. It's the assistant over here which judges how far the movement has been taken. But let's say we've got 21 centimeters. This person is a female, I believe. So then we can use what we call our normative table. Normative table. It's a nice term for you to learn, normative table. And what this does is it allows individuals to compare their result to standardized results across a population. So a normative table is a whole population average for this test. So we can see here, our female has over 15. She scored 21 as an average. So her result therefore means that in her case, she would be considered as having excellent excellent flexibility in this case. Now, of course, if she had scored 5, she would be down here and it would be below average. And of course, the values do vary slightly between males and females, although not a great deal, as you can see from here. By the way, these results are for 16 to 19-year-olds. I should have added. This is the table for 16 to 19-year-olds. So I kind of loosely fitted you guys into this group, okay? So a couple of points I'd like to raise. First of all, is this test valid? Well, broadly speaking, we'd say yes, it is. It is clearly measuring flexibility, but we do have to remind ourselves that flexibility is range of motion at all joints. Now, in this case, we are definitely measuring the flexibility of the hamstrings, of the gluteals, of the lower back, the erector spinae group, for example, which is stretching up here, of the shoulder, the deltoid muscles, for example, possibly of the tricep muscles. But we also have to acknowledge that really the prime focus of this flexibility test is of this kind of core region, the upper leg and the lower back and the glutes, okay? And we do find sometimes that games players, particularly footballers, hockey players, rugby players as well, they do tend to have very, very tight hamstrings. So you might find that people of that sporting background actually score lower in this kind of test result because that part of their body in particular tends to be less flexible. There are, of course, many, 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 many exceptions to that. So just be aware of that point for validity. Reliability, yes, we would say it's broadly a reliable test. If you reproduce this test, you are going to get broadly similar results. I should have said, by the way, earlier, absolutely critical that there is a warm-up done. I forgot to mention that earlier. Absolutely critical, and we're talking about something like a 10 minutes minimum kind of warm-up time. So we're saying reliability is very good. And practicality is likewise pretty easy. Look, you can these boxes themselves are pretty cheap. You could, a school or a gym could easily make one out of just by using wood, just crafting a little bit of wood. The other thing is it's a relatively accessible test for people. It is by definition a maximal test, but it's maximal through flexibility, not through something like aerobic endurance. So it is pretty practical in that sense. I guess the only limitation of the test is one at a time that you're kind of measuring. So, if you've got 30 people to measure, it's going to probably take a minute. It's going to take half an hour to get through all of those individuals. And you've also got the assistant, of course. Don't forget, you've also got the assistant. So some of the practicality is a little bit restrictive, but generally pretty good. All right, last points from me is I want to talk about advantages and disadvantages. So let me just drag down here. So ads. So let's talk about ads. It's cheap. It's simple, it's reliable, and to an extent it has some validity. But on the negative side, so disads, we're going to be saying one at a time. We're also going, and compare that to something like a multi-stage fitness test, for example. We're going to be saying also that it's really focused on the lower back and glutes. That's where the flexibility has really been measured rather than a whole body measure of flexibility. And that's it really. So we've got the advantages and disadvantages. So from what we previously described as our requirements of what we need to know about each test, I think we've got a pretty good understanding. Key things for me to remind you of: 2-second hold must be maintained in the most advanced position. You repeat 3 times and take the average, and you must compare to your normative table and therefore giving meaning to your results. Thanks.